You've been nothing but a headache since the day you walked in here. I should have listened to HR when they warned me about you. Consider this your official notice. Your services are no longer required, and if you try to make a scene, we'll make sure everyone knows exactly why. Hi, my name is Elena Harper. I am 29 years old. The words landed like a door slamming in a quiet hallway. I stood in David Langford's corner office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the row of prestigious waterfront villas the company had just broken ground on. My fingers curled around the edge of his desk so tightly the wood bit into my skin. He didn't even look up from his phone at first, just kept scrolling like I was a minor inconvenience he'd already handled. I had walked in that morning thinking we were going to talk about the budget variance on Phase 2. Instead, I got this: termination dressed up as performance issues. Patricia Ellison from HR had been standing just outside the door when I arrived, arms crossed, that tight little smile she used when she was about to deliver bad news and call it policy. David finally glanced up. Sign the severance and go quietly, Elena. It's better for everyone. I didn't move. You stole my proposal. The entire waterfront community concept the vendor list I spent 3 months negotiating the cost-saving structure I built. You put your name on it in the board packet and called it your vision. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. That's cute. You think anyone's going to believe the junior coordinator over the guy who signs the checks? HR already has the file on your unauthorized access to the financial folders. Disruptive behavior in meetings, insubordination, it's all documented. Patricia stepped in, then closing the door behind her, like she was shutting out witnesses. We're offering 6 weeks' pay and continued health coverage through the end of the quarter. In exchange, you sign the non-disparagement and release. Simple, simple. Like the last 18 months of 12-hour days and weekends spent fixing their messes had been simple. Like the night I stayed until 2 a.m. reworking the vendor contracts so the project wouldn't go over budget. Like the time I caught the first red flag in the supplier payments and flagged it quietly the way any responsible person would. I looked at Patricia. You know the numbers don't match the tax filings. You've seen the same ledgers I have. Her expression didn't change. What I know is that you accessed files outside your clearance level. That's a terminable offense. Sign, or we escalate. I felt the floor tilt under me, not from shock anymore, but from the cold, clear understanding that they had already decided how this story ended. I was the problem, the leak, the one who asked too many questions. I took the papers. I didn't sign them. I walked out of the office past the row of desks where people suddenly found very important things to look at on their screens. My coworker, Liam Soto, caught my eye for half a second, then looked away. That hurt more than I expected. I drove home to my apartment 3 blocks from the water, the same view the villas were supposed to have, but smaller and cheaper. I sat on the couch with the severance packet on the coffee table and called my brother Jason. He answered on the second ring. Elena, you sound off. They fired me. The words came out flat. David and Patricia, they said I went rogue on the financials. They have documentation. Jason was quiet for a long moment. I could hear the low hum of his office in the background, the same kind of quiet that used to feel safe when we were kids. And he'd let me hide in his room during thunderstorms. I told you not to go in there alone, he said finally. I told you to let me look at everything first. You said there was a pattern. You said it looked like a slush fund. I thought if I brought it up privately, he'd fix it before it became a bigger problem. Jason exhaled the sound sharp. It's bigger than a problem, Elena. I kept digging after you showed me those files last weekend. One of the accounts traces to a shell company David set up 2 years ago. The payments aren't just sloppy. They're deliberate. And some of them are going to places that don't show up on any vendor list we have. My stomach dropped. How much enough that if the IRS or the board sees the full picture, He doesn't just lose his job, he loses everything. I stared at the severance papers. 6 weeks' pay in exchange for my silence, in exchange for letting him keep doing whatever he was doing with company money, while I got painted as the unstable one who couldn't handle pressure. I'm not signing, I said. I figured. Jason's voice shifted quieter. But if we push this, it's not just him. Some of the transfers touch accounts my firm has handled for other clients. I could get dragged in. Professional review. Questions about whether I knew and said nothing. The line went quiet again. I could feel the weight of what he wasn't saying settling between us. There's more in those files than I told you the first time, he added. David isn't the only name that shows up. The call ended. I sat in the dark with my phone still in my hand and the city lights reflecting off the water outside my window. The same water the company was turning into million-dollar views for people who would never know what it cost to build them. I had 24 hours before Patricia would call and ask if I'd signed. 24 hours before they started telling the story their way. I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet I'd been building, the one with the mismatched numbers, was still open from the night before. I saved a copy to a secure drive and emailed it to myself from a new account. Then I forwarded the same file to Jason with one line, "Tell me what I'm really looking at." He replied 20 minutes later with a single sentence that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "We need to talk. In person. And not at your place." I closed the laptop. The severance papers sat untouched on the table. Outside, the lights from the half-built villas glittered like promises that had already been broken. David Langford thought he'd ended this cleanly. He thought firing the person who asked questions would make the questions go away. He had no idea I was about to start asking them out loud. I drove to the diner Jason had chosen 2 towns over on a quiet stretch of road that smelled like old coffee and fryer grease. It was the kind of place where the booths were cracked vinyl, and the waitress called everyone home without looking up from her order pad. Safe. Anonymous. Exactly what we needed. Jason was already there in a corner booth with his laptop open and a stack of papers tucked under a napkin, like he was hiding evidence from the world. He looked tired. The same tired he got when we were kids, and he stayed up late helping me with math homework while our parents argued downstairs. He slid a folder across the table as I sat down. "Read it," he said quietly. "And keep your voice down." I opened the folder. Pages of bank statements, redacted vendor lists, and highlighted lines from what looked like tax filings. The numbers jumped out immediately. Large transfers labeled as consulting fees to companies that didn't exist on any public record. Payments that matched the exact overruns I had flagged on the waterfront project. And at the bottom of one page, a name I recognized. Patricia Ellison. I looked up at Jason. "She's in this." He nodded once. "Her name shows up on 3 approvals for wire transfers that went to the same shell company David set up. Not as the sender. As the approver on the company side. She signed off on them." The sarcasm rose in my throat like acid. Of course she did. The same HR manager who sat in that office and told me I was the problem. The one who smiled while they built the file to fire me. Jason leaned forward. "Elena, this isn't just sloppy accounting. These transfers line up with personal expenses on David's end. Private school tuition for his kids that doesn't match his reported salary. A vacation home in the Keys that the company books as a client retreat. And the tax returns the company filed last year. They don't match the internal ledgers by almost $200,000. That's not a rounding error. That's deliberate." I stared at the pages. My hands were steady, but the bitter taste in my mouth was getting stronger. They had fired me for noticing what Patricia had helped hide. They had called me disruptive, while she signed the checks that kept the whole thing quiet. "There's more," Jason said. He pulled out another sheet. I reached out to someone I used to work with. Marcus Hale. He used to do forensic audits for the state before he went private. I showed him the redacted versions. He confirmed it. These aren't just internal games. If the IRS looks at the actual returns versus what the company reported, someone is going to prison. Marcus Hale. A new name. A new person pulled into this because I had refused to sign the papers and walk away. I closed the folder. So what do we do? Jason rubbed his face with both hands. We have options. Anonymous tip to the IRS or to the board. Or we go to a reporter who covers corporate fraud. But none of them are clean. If this blows up, David and Patricia will come after you harder. They already planted the story that you're unstable. They'll double down on it. And my name is on some of the early audits for their other projects. I could lose my license if they spin it right. The words hit like another door closing. My own brother, the only person I had trusted with this, was already calculating the cost to himself. I couldn't blame him. But it still stung in that quiet, familiar way. I'm not signing the severance, I said. I'm not letting them write the ending. Jason looked at me for a long moment. Then we need to be smart. No more solo confrontations. No more going into the office. You stay low, gather what you can from the outside, and we move together. Marcus said he can help trace the shell companies if we give him a week. But Elena, once we start this, we can't stop halfway. They won't let us. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Elena Harper. A woman's voice clipped and professional. This is Patricia Ellison. We noticed you haven't returned the signed severance documents. David wanted me to remind you that the offer expires at 5 p.m. tomorrow. After that, we'll have no choice but to pursue the matter through legal channels. You should really think about what's best for your future. I didn't answer. I just ended the call and set the phone face down. Jason raised an eyebrow. They're already pushing. They think I'm going to fold, I said. The sarcasm came out sharper than I meant, because that's what people like me do when the boss and HR close ranks. We take the money and disappear so they can keep doing whatever they want with the books. I opened my laptop right there in the booth and logged into the secure email I had created the night before. I attached the cleanest copy of the spreadsheet I had built, the one with the mismatched vendor payments and the tax discrepancies highlighted. I typed a short anonymous message to the company's general counsel and the chair of the audit committee. No name, no return address, just the facts and the files. I hit send before I could second guess it. Jason watched me. You just lit the fuse. I know. He closed his laptop and slid the folder back toward me. Keep this somewhere safe, not at your apartment. And Elena, if Marcus finds what I think he's going to find, this stops being about your job. It becomes about federal charges. David and Patricia won't go quietly. They'll try to take you down with them. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from the company's IT department. Subject line, account access revoked. Effective immediately. The body was short. My company emailed my project files. Even my old timesheets had been locked. And at the bottom, a single line that made my chest tighten. Any further unauthorized access attempts will be reported to law enforcement. They were already moving, cutting me off, making sure I couldn't dig any deeper from the inside. I looked across the table at Jason. They're scared. They should be, he said, but his voice didn't sound triumphant. It sounded like a man who had just realized how far this could go and how much it might cost the people he cared about. We sat there for another 20 minutes, going over the next steps in low voices. Marcus would call Jason in the morning with an initial trace on the shell companies. I would stay offline as much as possible and start looking for a lawyer who handled whistleblower cases, someone who wouldn't flinch when they heard the names Langford and Ellison. Jason would keep his distance publicly, but feed me what he could through the secure channel we set up. When we stood to leave, he pulled me into a quick, awkward hug in the parking lot. Be careful, he said. And don't do anything stupid just to prove a point. I managed a half smile. When have I ever done anything stupid? He didn't smile back. This isn't a game, Elena. They already showed you what they're willing to do to protect themselves. Firing you was the nice version. I watched him drive away. The diner's neon sign flickered in the rearview mirror as I pulled onto the highway. The waterfront villas were still under construction. In the distance, their frames lit up against the dark water like bones. Back at my apartment, I locked the door and sat on the couch with the folder in my lap. The severance papers were still on the coffee table where I had left them. I picked them up, read the non-disparagement clause one more time, and tore them in half. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. No name, just the message. Signing would have been easier. Now it gets expensive, for both of us. I didn't reply. I saved the number. I forwarded it to Jason with one word, they know. Then I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing everything I remembered from the last 18 months. Every meeting where David took credit. Every time Patricia redirected a question about budgets. Every red flag I had quietly documented and then been told to ignore. If they wanted a war, I wasn't going to fight it from the defensive. I was going to make sure the numbers spoke first. But as I typed, the bitter edge in my chest sharpened into something colder. Jason was right. This wasn't just about getting my job back or clearing my name. Once Marcus finished tracing those accounts, people were going to lose more than titles. And the people who had smiled in my face while they built the case against me were already preparing their next move. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of waves against the shore. They thought firing me ended it. They had no idea I had just started writing the real story. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from blocked numbers and an email from the company's outside counsel sitting in my inbox like a loaded gun. The subject line was polite enough. Follow-up on separation agreement. The body was not. They had attached a revised severance offer shorter on the payout and heavier on the threats. If I didn't sign by close of business, they would pursue claims for unauthorized data access and defamation of company leadership. They even included a helpful note that any public statements I made could be used against me in court. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Jason with one line. They're moving faster than we thought. He called me 10 minutes later from a number I didn't recognize. Don't reply to anything, not even to say no. I'm meeting Marcus Hale in an hour. He wants to talk to both of us on a secure line. Can you be ready? I said yes. What else was there to say? We used an encrypted app Jason set up. Marcus Hale's voice came through clear and dry, the voice of a man who had spent 20 years looking at other people's lies on paper. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Ms. Harper, your brother showed me the files you flagged. I've cross-referenced them against the company's publicly filed tax returns for the last 2 fiscal years. The discrepancies are not minor. We're looking at roughly $280,000 in unreported transfers routed through 3 shell entities. One of those entities paid for David Langford's daughter's private school tuition last semester. Another covered a down payment on a property in his wife's name that doesn't appear on any personal financial disclosure. I kept my voice steady. And Patricia Ellison. Marcus paused, just long enough for the silence to feel deliberate. Her digital signature appears on 4 of the approval chains, not as the initiator, as the secondary approver who cleared the wires after the primary flag was ignored. She also created and maintained the internal performance file on you that HR used as justification for termination. The file was opened 3 weeks before you ever raised the budget questions in the meeting. It looks like it was prepared in advance. The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. They were already building the case against me before I said a word. She was protecting him and covering her own tracks at the same time. Correct, Marcus said. And the pattern suggests this wasn't the first time. There are similar anomalies in two earlier projects from last year. If this goes to the IRS or the SEC, both of them are exposed. But so was anyone who signed off on the broader financial reporting. Jason cut in. Marcus, how clean is this trace? If we take it to the authorities, can they tie it directly without dragging in? People who didn't know Marcus's answer was blunt. No. The web is wide enough that some innocent signatures will get pulled into the initial review. That's how these things work. You want the big fish, you sometimes net the smaller ones swimming next to them. I closed my eyes for a second. The cost was already climbing. My job, my reputation. Now possibly other people's jobs, who had nothing to do with David and Patricia's side deals. Marcus continued. I can prepare a clean summary package. No speculation, just the numbers and the approvals. If you want to submit it as a whistleblower complaint, I'll walk you through the process. It protects your identity initially, but once they start digging, your name will surface. And Langford's legal team will come at you with everything they have. I thought about the text from the night before. Now it gets expensive, for both of us. They weren't bluffing. I'm not signing anything that lets them walk away clean, I said. Send me the package. I'll review it tonight and decide by morning. After the call ended, Jason stayed on the line. His voice was quieter than before. Elena, I need you to hear me on this. Marcus is good, but he's not magic. If we push David and Patricia will leak everything they can about you. The performance issues, the alleged unauthorized access, maybe even old complaints from when you first started. They'll paint you as the unstable one who couldn't handle the pressure. Some people will believe it, especially in this industry. I stared at the wall of my apartment, the same wall I had stared at the night I got fired. So what are you saying? That I should take the money and disappear so they can keep doing it? I'm saying the price is higher than 6 weeks' pay now, and I can't be the one who pays part of it with my license. I've already pushed further than I should. The words landed heavier than any threat from David or Patricia. My brother, the person who had always been the steady one, was pulling back, not completely, but enough that I felt the ground shift under the plan we had just made. I understand, I said. And I did. That didn't make it hurt less. We ended the call without either of us saying goodbye. I spent the rest of the day building the timeline Marcus had asked for. Every date, every meeting, every email where David redirected a question or Patricia changed the subject. I attached the clean copies of the spreadsheets and the tax discrepancy highlights. I didn't name names beyond what the documents already showed. I kept it factual. Cold? The way Marcus wanted it. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang from another unknown number. This time I answered. Elena. It was David's voice, smooth and calm like we were still in a performance review. I heard you've been busy, talking to people outside the company, asking questions that don't concern you anymore. I didn't give him the satisfaction of sounding rattled. You fired me. That means I don't work for you. I can talk to whoever I want. He chuckled low and ugly. You always did think rules didn't apply to you. Patricia tried to warn me. She said you were the type who would burn the place down on your way out. Looks like she was right. Funny, I said. She seemed pretty comfortable signing off on the wires that paid for your daughter's school. Or was that one of the files she conveniently left out of my performance file? The line went quiet for a beat too long. When he spoke again, the smoothness was gone. You have no idea what you're playing with. Sign the papers. Take the money. Or I will make sure every door in this city closes in your face. And I'll start with your brother's firm. They do a lot of work with our partners. It would be a shame if questions started getting asked about his judgment. He hung up before I could answer. I sat with the phone in my hand, the sarcastic comeback I wanted to say still sitting on my tongue. He had gone straight for Jason, not me. Jason, who had already told me he couldn't afford to stay in this. My hands were shaking when I called Marcus back. I told him what David had said. Marcus didn't sound surprised. "They're panicking," he said. "That's good for us and bad for you. Panicking people make mistakes, but they also make threats they're willing to follow through on. I can have the summary package ready in 2 hours. If you want to submit it tonight, we can do it through the IRS whistleblower portal. It starts the clock on their side." I looked at the half-finished timeline on my screen, at the torn severance paper still sitting on the coffee table, at the phone that had just carried David's voice into my apartment like he still owned the air I breathed. "Do it," I said. "Send it. I'll sign whatever I need to sign on my end." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Once this goes in, there's no pulling it back. And Elena, your brother might be right about the cost. These cases don't stay quiet. People choose sides. Some of them will choose the side that keeps their own jobs safe. I know I said." I submitted the package at 7:42 p.m. through the secure portal Marcus had set up. No name attached at first, just the evidence and a short statement that the discrepancies appeared deliberate and involved senior leadership. I kept a copy for myself. Then I forwarded the confirmation to Jason with 2 words. "It's done." He didn't reply for 40 minutes. When the message finally came, it was short. "I can't be part of the next steps. I'm sorry. Be careful." That was it. No explanation. No offer to talk it through. Just the clean cut of someone protecting what he had left. I sat on the couch in the dark and let the silence settle. The bitter part of me wanted to call him back and ask how he could walk away when he had been the one who first confirmed the slush fund existed. The rest of me understood. He had a life, a license, a future that didn't have to burn because his little sister refused to be the easy target. The emotional weight hit harder than I expected. Not anger, not even the sharp sarcasm I had been using like armor since the day I got fired. Just a hollow, aching tiredness that made my chest feel too tight and my eyes burn. I had spent 18 months trying to do the job right. I had spoken up once, and now I was sitting alone in an apartment I could barely afford, with my brother pulling away and 2 powerful people already promising to destroy whatever was left of my name. I let myself cry for exactly 4 minutes. Then I wiped my face, opened a new document, and started drafting the letter I would send to every industry contact I still had. Not the dramatic version, the factual one. The one that said I had raised legitimate concerns about financial reporting been terminated and was now cooperating with appropriate authorities. I attached nothing. I just wanted the record to exist somewhere outside my own files. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My phone had gone quiet. No more calls, no more texts, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the water against the shore. I had done what I said I wouldn't do. I had refused to disappear quietly. Now I had to live with what that actually cost. The morning after I submitted the package, the first cracks appeared in the form of a company-wide email that landed in my personal inbox from an address I didn't recognize. It was short and carefully worded. An internal investigation had been opened into certain financial reporting practices on the waterfront project and 2 prior developments. David Langford and Patricia Ellison had been placed on administrative leave pending review. The message ended with the usual corporate language about cooperation and confidentiality, but the subtext was clear. Someone had acted on the numbers I had flagged. I read it 3 times. The sarcastic voice in my head wanted to laugh. They had fired me for noticing the problem, and now the problem was big enough that the company had to pretend they were shocked by it. But the laugh didn't come. Instead, I felt the first real tremor of what this was going to cost. Marcus called that afternoon with an update. His voice was the same dry professional tone, but there was an edge of satisfaction underneath. The IRS acknowledged receipt and opened a preliminary review. They're requesting additional documents from the company. That usually means they see enough to keep digging. Langford's legal team is already circling. They filed a motion to limit the scope, but it won't hold if the discrepancies keep stacking up. I asked the question I had been avoiding. What about Patricia Marcus hesitated for half a second? Her approvals are the cleanest trail. She didn't just sign the wires. She also routed some of the consulting fees through a separate entity that paid a consulting fee back to her husband's LLC. It's small, but it's there. She was skimming while she protected him. That's why she built your performance file so early. She needed a distraction in case anyone started asking questions. The revelation landed like another door closing, but this one felt final. Patricia hadn't just been following orders. She had been an active participant, using me as the convenient villain to keep the spotlight off her own small slice of the scheme. The HR manager who had smiled through my onboarding and then smiled through my firing had been stealing too. The bitterness in my chest sharpened into something colder and clearer. I thanked Marcus and ended the call. Then I sat on the couch and let the weight of it settle. My brother had walked away to protect his license. My former boss and the HR director who had helped destroy my reputation were now facing federal scrutiny because I had refused to disappear. And I was sitting in an apartment I could no longer afford on savings that were already thinning, with no job, no references that would survive a background check, and a growing list of industry contacts who had stopped replying to my messages. The industry letter I had drafted the night before sat unsent in my drafts folder. I opened it, read it once more, and deleted it. Sending it wouldn't clear my name. It would only confirm to everyone who mattered that I was the one who had blown the whistle. In this world, that made me radioactive. Better to let the authorities do their work and let the story spread on its own terms. 3 days later, the company issued a public statement. David Langford had resigned to pursue other opportunities. Patricia Ellison had been terminated for cause. The board had retained independent auditors to review the last 3 years of financials. No names were mentioned beyond theirs. No mention of me. But the gossip started anyway. A former colleague texted me a screenshot from a private industry group chat. Someone had posted that the troublemaker who got fired for performance issues had apparently gone nuclear and taken the executives down with her. The comments underneath were a mix of shock and the predictable pile on. I always thought she seemed unstable. Good thing they got rid of her before she did real damage. I didn't reply to the text. I just saved the screenshot and added it to the folder I was keeping for myself. Proof that even when the truth came out, the narrative they had planted would follow me. Jason called one last time, 2 weeks after the public statement. His voice was careful and distant, like he was already practicing how to talk to a stranger. I saw the news, he said. It looks like it's moving forward. I wanted to check on you. I'm fine, I said. The lie came easily. Marcus is handling the handoff to the investigators. I'm staying out of it now. There was a long pause. Elena, I need to be clear. I can't testify or provide any more documentation. My firm did work with Langford Developments on 2 other projects last year. If this turns into a bigger case, they'll look at everything. I have to protect what I have left. I had known it was coming, but hearing it still knocked the air out of me. My brother, the only family I had been counting on to stand beside me when it got hard, was choosing the safer distance. The last thread connecting me to the life I had before this started was being cut. I get it, I said. My voice stayed steady. Take care of yourself, Jason. He started to say something else, maybe an apology, but I ended the call before he could finish. Some goodbyes are cleaner when you make them yourself. That night, the breakdown finally came. Not the controlled 4 minutes from before. This was the full ugly version. I sat on the floor of my apartment with my back against the couch and cried until my throat hurt and my eyes swelled shut. I cried for the job I had loved and lost, for the brother who had chosen his license over standing with me, for the 18 months I had spent proving myself to people who had already decided I was disposable, for the version of myself who had believed that doing the right thing would protect me. When the tears finally stopped, I stayed on the floor for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The sarcastic voice that had carried me through the worst of it was quiet now. In its place was something simpler and harder. I had spoken up. I had refused to sign away my voice. And the people who had tried to destroy me were facing consequences they couldn't buy their way out of. That was real. But it had cost me almost everything else I had built. I got up, washed my face, and opened my laptop. I updated my resume with the bare facts, Senior Project Coordinator at Langford Development's dates of employment, and nothing else. No accomplishments, no references. Then I started applying for contract work at smaller firms that didn't care about the big waterfront names. The pay would be lower. The work would be smaller. But it would be mine. A week later, I got a short email from Marcus. The IRS had expanded the review into a formal examination. David and Patricia were both represented by counsel and had declined to cooperate beyond what was legally required. The company had already begun restating earnings for the prior periods. It wasn't a victory parade. It was slow grinding accountability. But it was happening. I didn't celebrate. I just closed the email and went for a walk along the water, past the half-finished villas that had started all of this. The frames still stood against the sky, but the company signs had been taken down. Someone else would finish them now, someone who hadn't been part of the lie. I thought about David's last threat, and Patricia's careful performance file, and Jason's careful withdrawal. They had all tried to make me small enough to disappear. I hadn't disappeared. But I also hadn't won in the way the old version of me would have wanted. There was no triumphant return, no cleared name in the industry, no restored relationship with my brother. There was just the quiet fact that I had chosen not to let them write the ending for me. That choice had cost me my job, my professional network, and the last easy connection to my family. It had also given me something I hadn't expected, the freedom to stop measuring my worth by whether powerful people approved of me. Detaching from the need to be seen as the good employee, the loyal sister, the one who played by rules that were never meant to protect people like me, had been painful. It had also been the only way forward. I kept walking until the sun dropped behind the water. My phone stayed silent. No more threats. No more apologies. Just the sound of the waves and the knowledge that I was finally free of the story they had tried to force me to live inside. Thank you for listening to my story. If you were in my place, would you have signed the severance and walked away to protect the people you loved? Or would you have done what I did and accepted the cost of speaking up